everyone, I hope you're enjoying the snow as much as I am. Today I'm going to read you chapter 27 of Brightstorm, which is called The Southern Aurora. It wasn't much further before the small band of explorers finally saw a glimmer of bluish gold light, different from their torch fire, in the tunnel ahead. They broke into a run, the rush of freezing fresh air enveloping them. With a great whoosh, Parthena flew past Arthur and out into the open. Harriet wasn't far behind. "I can't wait to be outside again." But at the tunnel exit, they all came to a standstill and stared open-mouthed. It was the short night. Before them, a vast field of snow stretched out for many miles as they could see. But it was the view above that took their breath away. Huge waves of colour rippled into the star-speckled sky, emerald green, piercing pink and luminous orange. Luminous. Luminous. No one spoke as they stood in the utter quiet of winter's dusk and watched the dance of light. "Well, that's a sight to behold, and no mistaking," whispered Felciity. Arthur was sure he saw a tear in the corner of Harriet's eye as she whispered, "It's the Southern Aurora." "Is this why you named the ship the Aurora?" he asked. Harriet nodded. "I had heard the tales of those seen in the north, and I dared to hope we might see them here, but I never expected anything this beautiful." "Dad was so close," Maudie said. "He would have loved this," Arthur smiled. After a while, Harriet took out the lunoscope and looked across the plains. "All seems quiet. I don't believe the Vane crew have found a faster way through the mountain." She unfastened her wayfinder and started manipulating it and lining it up with the horizon of the South Star. "When we reach 90 degrees and the sun remains in the same place in the sky, then we will be at the exact point of South Polaris." She scribbled some calculations in her notebook, closely watched by Maudie. After a moment, Harriet smiled. "I estimate it will take no more than 2 days." They hugged each other. "We should rest the night in the security of the mountain. Or do we keep going and pitch up when we're too tired to walk another step?" The glint of adventure was in Harriet's eyes. "I think we can go on for a few more chimes. That's if you're both all right with it," said Felciity. Arthur and Maudie looked at each other. They'd lost everything, but now they had the chance to complete Dad's last mission. "Let's go," Arthur said, and they began heading down towards the great snow plain. After several chimes travelling, the intense cold was getting to them. Their footsteps had become slow and laboured, and they yawned and shivered, huddled into their jackets, chins to their chests. The light changed suddenly as a great bank of dark clouds raged in from the south, travelling at frightening speed. Great plumes of thick grey billowed towards them. "That doesn't look good," Harriet said. Her words a teeth-chattering stammer. She looked back to the mountains and slammed the uniscope against her leg. "We should have rested there. We were too hasty, and now we're going to be caught in what could be the most vicious storm I've ever seen. And I don't fancy our chances in the tent." They exchanged worried looks. What would Dad do, Arthur thought. He'd always taught him to use what they had, not to focus on what you couldn't do, but what you could. But there was only snow as far as they could see. Then it came to him. "We could make a cave, a bit like the Thortwoods made in the tree roots." "There aren't exactly any trees here, Artie," Maudie said. "No, he's right. It's a great idea. We dig a snow cave and wait out the storm. We need a snow ridge. It'll make it easier," said Harriet. "There," said Maudie, pointing westwards. As the sky darkened further, they trudged over the ridge and began digging an entrance hole. Maudie and Felciity scooped out a cavity, while Arthur and Harriet cleared the snow they had dug to stop it blocking the entrance. They didn't say a word, and Arthur's jaw felt so frozen tight he couldn't speak even if he wanted to. Soon it was completely dark. They were buffeted by a wind that almost knocked them from their feet. Harriet clipped her safety rope to Arthur, and even though it felt impossible, the temperature dropped further. The snow swirled around them, so they couldn't see anything apart from their dark shapes in a spiral of white. Still, they dug with quivering breaths as the icy temperatures bit all around. Quivering. When it seemed as bad as it could get, the ferocity of the storm grew even more intense. The freezing wind hit, howling with anger and shooting shards of ice. Arthur felt sure in another few seconds they would become statues. He shook uncontrollably, and he couldn't feel his body anymore. "One last push," Harriet stuttered as they dug a few more scoops. Then she pushed Arthur into the hole and followed. "We need to build up the door to protect ourselves," said Maudie. They all scooped more from the walls around them to build the door. They fought to keep it in place while the wind and snow hurled and whistled outside. Soon the gap was filled and the raging snowstorm grew muffled. They sat with their legs tucked in, squished together, teeth chattering and bodies shaking. After a moment, Harriet reshaped an area of the wall into a shelf and placed a candle on it. "If that goes out, we'll need an opening in the air quickly. You try to sleep and I'll keep watch." "We'll take turns," said Felciity through blue lips. "I'll go first," said Arthur. "Then me." Harriet smiled. "All right, a chime each." All they could do was keep as close together as possible and try to sleep while they listening to the fierce growl of the wind of the battering outside. And wait. After Arthur's watch, he woke Maudie. "Hey, it's your turn." She rubbed her eyes and nodded. As he closed his eyes, he whispered, "I was dreaming of Dad. Back on the Violetta. There's something that I can't shake, Artie." He opened his eyes. "What is it?" "We know that Eudora Vane did this, but it's so calculated, all planned out. And that story they made up about the fuel theft. She didn't just want to stop them, she wanted to discredit Dad." He nodded. "I've been thinking the same. We know how she did it, but do we really know why? There feels like there has to be more to it." Arthur's brain rolled over and over. Eventually, he snuggled his head into Felicity's shoulder and let sleep take him. The absence of noise woke Arthur. The storm had left. There was a small gap in the cave above. Harriet poked her head in, her face big and beaming. "The storm has passed. Are you all right?" He nodded. He could just about feel his fingers and toes. "And the others?" "Still sleeping." His shoulders ached where he'd been scrunched up for so long. "Will you be able to squeeze through and help me?" she asked. Even though the last thing he wanted to do was leave the meagre warmth that had built up in the snow cave, he nodded and managed to crawl through the opening. Once outside, the sky was cloudless, as though nothing had happened, and the sun so bright he covered his eyes for a moment, until he got used to it. He saw Harriet had dug a hole and was making a fire. Felciity took 2 watches. "She didn't wake me, but I must admit I slept like a baby." Arthur was drawn by her great energy. She was so assured in everything she did. Little had fazed her apart from being penned in the cave. He hoped one day he would be like her. Together they dug a bigger hole out for the others and set some snow over the heat to melt into water for cooking and drinking. The others soon woke. Felciity stretched her arms. "I feel as though I've been shaken up by nature's great hand itself and thrown into a heap of frozen bones which have gone back all wrong." She cooked a porridge flavoured with dried berries she gathered in the forest, while the others warmed by the fire. Maudie insisted on polishing Arthur's iron arm. "You must look best for the Polaris," she said. Then they ate, and even though it was a tiny ration, it took away some of Arthur's hunger and warmed him from the inside. Harriet checked their direction, and they packed quickly. "Well, here we are, at the last stage. I think things are going to be a lot easier today," she said with a smile. They started walking, but Felciity paused. "What is it?" Arthur asked. "I've a strange tingling in my toes, and I don't like it." "Keep moving. You need to get your circulation going." "They're not cold. It's that feeling I get." They'd only been walking for a few moments before when an enormous boom thumped through the mountainside behind them, stopping them dead. What was that? They looked behind as another boom punched through the air. What's going on? It's stating the obvious, but I think something's exploded, said Felciity. Another huge crash sounded and snow and rock shot into the air in the distant mountains behind. The explosions kept coming. Parthena took flight and flew away screeching. Where are you going? Come back, Arthur called. The noise is likely scaring her, said Felciity. His calling whistle was lost on the wind. He watched helpless as she flew northeast. Then everything fell quiet again. Harriet was glued to the uniscope. I don't believe it. She passed the uniscope to Arthur. The crammed mountains now had a narrow slice of sky between the lower down. He swallowed hard. How far to the Polaris, Harriet? Half a day, she said faintly. No wonder they weren't hurrying to chase us under the mountain. She's making her own path straight through. It must have been her plan all along, which is why we caught up with her more quickly than we expected. It wasn't just the pitch she was carrying, it was a huge amount of explosives, said Maudie. But it's not big enough to get the Victorious through yet, said Arthur. They stared as another explosion echoed across the land. Felciity took her lucky spoon from her fur coat and jabbed it angrily in the air. It's an abomination, doing that to a giant of nature. Abomination. Abomination. Someone who thinks she can do whatever she wants and get away with it, Harriet said. Arthur whistled once more for Parthena, but she'd flown from sight. She's probably just finding a safe place to hide. That bird has traversed continents. She'll be back, Maudie said. Arthur took a deep breath and nodded. We have to go, right now. There's no way we're going to let Eudora Vane get to South Polaris before us, Harriet, he said. That's one heck of a look of determination you've got in your eye, Brightstorm, Harriet smiled at him. And please, call me Harry. I tell everyone to call me Harriet rather than Captain, but my dearest, closest friends call me Harry. A warm glow filled inside him. We'll make it first, even if we have to run the whole way. Maudie took Arthur's hand and gave a defiant nod. Then she reached for Harriet's hand and Felciity grasped Arthur's iron fingers. They stood for a moment, then let go and trudged onwards. Arthur no longer felt the vicious bite of the frozen south. The burning need inside him to make it to South Polaris drove him forward and at a relentless pace. They maintained a fast and steady trek through the deep snow, with Arthur calling out the rhythm if they slowed. After 2 chimes, they paused for Harriet to check coordinates with her wayfinder. The explosions had stopped and the new sound buzzed in the distance. The Victorious was gaining on them. Arthur could no longer feel his toes or the fingers on his left hand. The relentless pace and no stopping for rest or to warm themselves was taking its toll. But they had to carry on. There was no choice. They had to get justice for Dad. His entire crew had died because of Eudora, and they couldn't let her go down in history for succeeding. They were so close now. One last push. It was then the great shadow of the Victorious loomed behind them. As the darkness overtook him, Arthur ran, not knowing where the strength came from, his muscles burning and his ears throbbing with the engine noise. He increased his speed, but the Victorious edged in front and he was chasing its shadow. Like a water through his fingers, it was slipping away. He pushed harder, his lungs on fire, but the ship was too far ahead. His boot caught in the snow. He tripped and rolled, then watched, utterly helpless, as the Victorious hovered and lowered, landing directly on the flat indent of South Polaris, a short distance ahead. He sank his face into the snow. The feeling of failure gouged at him. He'd never felt so helpless. The others were soon with him. They sat in the snow, their shoulders sagged, faces sullen and disbelieving. No one spoke for a long time. Anger churned inside Arthur. He fought every urge in his body telling him to run onwards to Eudora and confront her, to find out why she had killed his father's crew. But Arthur knew his rash decisions had cost him before. It had cost Tuyok more. For once he had to stop himself. He pounded the snow with his fist. Then the crumple of hurried footsteps in the snow sounded behind him. It took him a moment to realise what was happening. Maudie was hurtling towards the Victorious. Oh no, Eudora Vane got there first. I wonder what Maudie's going to do in the next chapter. Let's hope nothing bad happens. Thank you for watching this chapter of Brightstorm, and I'll see you soon for another one. Bye.